Okay, so I'll be recording it, sorry. I should have done that from the beginning. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about were alternative learning formats. There's a whole list of them in the agenda. And I'm curious to know, I mean, things like, I know distance learning is not actually an alternative learning format anymore, but let's try this. What in the list of CPE definitions is a definition that you actually use as an actual alternative learning format? Because I'm assuming evening, weekend, morning classes is not anything that anybody's tracking individually anymore. Well, let's just do them one at a time. Would you say that accelerated course? Oh yeah, go ahead, Beth.
So I just wanted to say that some of these definitions say courses, and I don't know if, I mean, yes, we have courses that follow some of these things, but not a whole program. And so oftentimes those courses are gen ed, which now I know gen ed is an educational program according to the SAC COC, and so I'm working on that one. Thank you, Rayanne. But those tend to be course definitions, not program definitions. So that's confused. So before you start on the list, Sheila, I wanted to say, like, can we talk about that?
Yeah, okay. I think then, yeah, that makes sense. So I think the intent is, the question is, do any of the courses in the program have any of these features? So we'll need to modify that so it's clear that the intent is not, is there an alternative learning format for the program, but within the program, are there courses that offer alternative learning formats? Does that make sense?
And then I would say every single program we have.
Right.
So I would check a box for every single program. So I don't know that makes, that there's no differentiation for that.
So
yeah, I think you need to set, maybe we've set, like, I think someone earlier had pointed out, you know, maybe what are we calling hybrid? Where does the threshold have to be, or, you know, what percentage of the program needs to be distance learning in order to call that program hybrid? And I think it's the same kind of thing for these, like, what's the, do a majority of the courses have to be offered in accelerated format or in one of the other things? Because like especially at the undergraduate level, you know, all of our programs would fit some of those, but yeah.
okay, so then the question then would probably be, do any of the courses have alternative learning formats? And so that may be the case that, you know, you're going to answer yes to all of them. But in terms of the specific alternative learning formats, are there, and I understand that, you know, I don't even know what a modularized course is. I don't know what a technology enhanced instruction is. I mean, I figure that terminology's got to be 1 billion years old. So what would you all consider an alternative learning format? Is there something on this list that your institution does regularly or you take pride in, but it's not something that you have a chance to identify?
I was just thinking that maybe, I know SACS has a lot of language like distance learning that we still have to keep in our categories, because, you know, we're going to need that until they change it. But alternative learning formats, these are all, you know, the face-to-face meeting 3 times a week or twice a week, yes, is traditional, but everything else is now, I'm not a third, everything else, you know, online is alternative. It's just a mode, right?
Okay.
We have different delivery modes and different learning modes. And so perhaps we need to even back up one more step and say, do we want to use a category like alternative learning modes?
So it looks like most folks use, would it be correct to say that if we stick with the SAC COC definitions, that would be useful for everyone? Would that be a problem for it? Let me try a different way. Would using the SACS definitions be difficult for anyone?
Well, I have a question about other institutions, whether they have a challenge with the difference between, like, iPads being 100% online or the SACS definition at 51% online. That has kind of hung us up a little.
Mm-hmm.
I agree, Rayanne, and I think that also points to, like, the program level. labels versus a course by course label. So for our KPEDs, I mentioned that we align with the SEC COC definitions at the program level. And so our SEC COC inventory and our KPEDs inventory are tied together. And then I put iPads in another bucket.
So then it sounds like we need to, so the guidance needs to be clear as to whether we're looking at this at the program level of definition or the course level definition of, excuse me, the program level or course level. I'm going to try that third time. Whether the course level or program level distance learning information is the information that we're looking for. So it sounds like that's a distinction that we need to add. So, and I'm assuming we don't want to go to the course level. So for program level distance learning, do those SACS definitions, do those work then for program level distance learning? Sounds right. Okay.
I don't know how many institutions are moving in this direction. It's not something UK is currently doing. But SACS also has the competency-based education. And so it might be a time to start including that. You know, I'd like to know who in the state is doing those kinds of programs and which ones are currently offered in that way.
I see some heads nodding. Would that be something good to include?
I would include it under modality here at the program level because that will also line up with SEC COC. Rayanne, at the CAO meeting in August, EKU announced that we just received approval for competency-based programs. Aw, well, thanks. I mean, it took forever, just.
Okay.
I know,
But if you,
congratulations.
well, thank you. If you'd like our proposal, just any of you can send me an email and I'll send it.
I would like that if you don't mind. I'd just be curious to know what that entails. So add competency-based education as a type of alternative learning format. Is accelerated courses something is that something that's sufficiently distinct that it should be its own thing?
It requires
think it
another
should-
sub change. Yeah, it does.
Yeah,
It's SACS.
An accelerated program, Sheila, I think,
I see.
not course. Yeah, let's stay at program. I'm with you on that.
Yeah, please continue to correct me, but I'm looking at program level things here. Just program level. Okay, so, and I think probably what we'll have to do is indicate that the alternative learning formats are comprised of courses that have certain characteristics. Because I don't think it works statewide to have a competency-based program, but I think it works statewide to say that there are competency-based courses inside the program, and EKU will be a standout because it will be all of your courses will be competency-based. Does that sound right?
So it's a little complicated because, you know, all of this accreditation stuff is complicated, but what the competency-based education program approval allows is that 51% or more of our courses are delivered by competency-based to achieve that degree.
So, okay, so I will, and by the way, I'll send all this stuff out to you all. I will do edits, things, and send them all to you again. So this is not your last bite of the apple. This is just enough for me to be able to get something for you all to look at that doesn't include the phrase World Wide Web. So in the list of that, the courses that combine various modes of interaction, I assume we can just delete that entirely. That's almost every course in some way, shape, or form. Rolling entrance and completion times based on self-pacing. Is that something that any of you use? Is that even a thing?
Yeah.
Was that a yes?
It's,
I-
that's
I-
How do you define your
Pays the pen.
program, though? I just think that there's some nuances that are unnecessary and very difficult for us to track when someone changes that. It's one thing when we have to notify SACs, there's a process in place. But some of these nuances, I'm not sure the value of tracking them. Just gonna play that devil's advocate.
Well, the, I think the intent is to be able to track it, but we're not doing a very good job of it if it takes too much time and effort to track it. So I'm wondering if, and part of what I try to keep in mind is the end result in this is we need to be able to have enough stuff that is tracked so that we can provide information to the legislature when they ask. So it sounds like things that could be measured by a percentage are things that you can classify a program by. So things like competency-based education, there's a firm percentage, and that's how you get to that for a program. For a course, so courses with rolling, and we'll just use that one, courses with rolling entrance and completion times based on self-pacing. I mean, theoretically, that sounds in some ways almost like an asynchronous distance learning course, depending on when the student adds or drops. So is there okay, I understand what you're all getting at now. Some of this stuff is too granular at the course level for you to be able to track it without going through it with a fine-tooth comb. Okay.
Right, and I think that,
Oh.
I'm sorry, we do, our asynchronous courses are asynchronous within the term that they are offered, but there are not rolling entrance and completion times. The course is, you start the course at this date and you finish the course at this date, but there is some flexibility in terms of like when you're completing your assignments within that time frame, or at least there's flexibility in terms of like, like you don't have to be in a class or an online class, a Zoom meeting at this particular day and time. You have to complete this module of coursework within this week or two, and then you have to complete this module. So it's not, I wouldn't have checked that for like any kind of asynchronous course. And then I'm also a little confused between, maybe I'm not seeing enough of a distinction between the rolling, so B3 and B4, so the rolling entrance and the courses with multiple entry, exit, and re-entry points, and also those. Maybe other institutions offer those and figure out how to offer them. It kind of hurts my brain to think of like the registrar's office dealing with that. So I don't think we do offer those, but.
And I couldn't tell you the difference between rolling entrance and completion times and multiple entry. I don't even know what a re-entry point for a course is. I don't even know how that works. So it sounds like
Oh,
three. Oh, go ahead.
Sheila, I'm sorry. So the closest thing that I think gets to that is competency based by direct assessment. And that would be at the program level as well. And so a direct assessment competency based modality would have built into it basically any on and off point throughout the year. So there are two modes for competency-based education. It would be by credit hour and then by direct assessment. And that feels like it might be what that course description is getting to.
Right, and that's what I was actually, I was going to ask it. If people thought that we should have something that for programs that allow some level of direct assessment or prior learning assessment or something like that.
Okay.
I don't know if we should track it or not. I'm just saying it seems like that might be a relevant alternative learning format.
Well, and we want these at the programmatic level, but the competency based is the only one so far that we found that has some kind of good metric to tie it to, as opposed to being able to say yes or no. I see how the other ones, even accelerated courses, it's not, if it's okay. All right. Well, and it may be the case that the alternative learning formats may just end up being, is this does this program have a competency-based assessments or something like that? It may be that this whole list goes away. Instruction in non-traditional locations, I assume that's a reference to off-campus instructional site. We had a conversation early on, I think in one of the focus groups, about an off-campus instructional site. Do you all, I don't know to the extent to which we track those, is it useful for you all to have those documented with a program? I thought I recalled someone saying that it would be useful to have them in the program inventory in some way, shape, or form, which means that we've got to collect it from you somehow.
KCTCS does not want that. No.
And it changes so often because
Right.
at least our high schools come on and go offline, so to speak. So I don't know that that would be useful.
I mean, we track it for, I mean, you know, I keep track of it and then we report that to SACS every time we have to submit a report, you know, where do we have 25 to 49%? Where do we have over 50%? But it does change it changes pretty often. And then sometimes there's a little ambiguity between whether or not you have an online course of, you know, what makes up that total percentage? Is it online plus in-person classes at this particular regional campus or this particular high school? And so I don't, like, we have that information, but it is a little bit, there are some ambiguities. And then also, you know, it's nice, it's okay to have it every 5 years, but I don't want to have to track it on an ongoing basis.
Okay, so is it, what I'm hearing is that especially at KCTCS, the off-campus instructional sites change so frequently that you would be spending time tracking that just to report that.
That is all taken care of at the individual colleges through their SACS COC liaisons, and that's the percentage, you know, what percentage of a credential is being taught at that off-campus site, and that changes. That, I mean, everything you're talking about right now, it's like you're talking about 3 circles and where they intersect. Like, I think about CPE as wanting to know programs, but the course formats change semester to semester at the same college. So I'm not sure how we would get that information to stay static.
Okay. So it sounds like this, the alternative learning formats, I think we're kind of winnowing it down to competency-based assessments, because I've not found anything else that's at the program level. And I think accelerated courses are so ubiquitous that they're not necessarily something that's of interest. I mean, I assume someone would track anything, but and then the off-campus instructional sites, the feedback I'm hearing is that those change so often that you would spend an inordinate amount of time tracking it for the sheer pleasure of reporting it, even though you all will be reporting it on a regular basis, just on a different schedule.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of alternative learning formats, would credit for prior learning be considered an alternative learning format?
I don't know what you would say. I don't know what we would say no to on that. I mean, we take a lot of credit for prior learning. So is that really a helpful piece of?
I don't know. So I see a couple heads shaking and maybe a couple nodding. So is credit for prior learning routinely done at all of the institutions?
It depends on how you want to define it, but yes, we all do some form of credit for prior learning. And we're using CPE's definition broadly, if anything, AP tests, AP exams, and military credit and so forth. So we're all doing that. SAC's definition would be if you have a program that requires prior learning for entry, that's where we would report that to SACS.
And I do remember that there's UK's got well, at least at one point it had a policy where you could test out of almost any course based on an exam that an instructor could give. So so it sounds like credit for prior learning is kind of in the same category as accelerated courses or compressed courses. It's just, it's part and parcel of what we do nowadays, as opposed to something that's entirely unique. Would that be a correct thing to say? And yes, at the course level, not at the program level.
Yes.
Sheila, can I ask a silly question and just be patient with me? What is CPE? What does CPE need to know? Like, I know they ask us a lot of questions about things, but what is it we're trying, like, what is the most important thing that CPE needs to know? I just want to understand.
I think, oh, sorry, go ahead. I think what we're looking at is we want, really, it goes back to the fact that we need to have enough data to be able to report on things to the legislature. We need to have enough data to know if there are outcomes that we should be seeking that we're not reaching. So I think part of this is, I mean, obviously this language in the program, in program inventory is like woefully out of date. So I think the intent is to make sure that we can, is that we have enough information to be able to share the information we need. But I think the thing that I'm going to try to do is straddle the line so that we have sufficient information, but through exchanges like this, we find out that we're poised or perhaps poised to ask you all for information that you can't access already. And so it'd be a ludicrous thing to propose. So the different sorts of data that we need, it sometimes, you know, it changes by virtue of what the legislature did, what, you know, what joint resolutions were out there, what's new and coming down the pike, that, you know, a legislator's family member, something, question, and then all of a sudden, you know, maybe gain some traction because it's of interest to many folks. So I don't have a good answer for you in terms of what data does the CPE want? We want the relevant necessary data, but I can't tell you what I mean, this is how we help figure out what's the relevant necessary data.
Okay. Thanks for your patience. I appreciate that, Sheila.
Well, I think that was, I don't know as though that question really answered. There was a lot of words and it sounded good. I'm not sure practically it gave you something that you can work with, but it's really just trying to, and I'm sensitive to people being asked for things that they don't understand why they have to do it, and nobody can figure out why they have to do it. So it's through conversations like this that we can do things like, for example, not suggest that you have SIPs for tracks, concentrations, and specializations. You know, because what happens is somebody in the past, somebody had asked Melissa for that, and that's why we had thought it would be something the institutions would want. So what happens is there's a good idea, somebody had it, and now we're at the point where we can do something with that idea. And then we talk about it, and it turns out maybe things have changed and that's not the direction that we want to go in anymore. So, so that, you know, some of it's just stuff that we had seen or heard from other institutions and we're following back up now because the timing is right. And, you know, and it could be the thing that the institution asked for got resolved 2.5 years ago through some other mechanism. I had a question, or I had a note to self to ask about high impact practices, but is it safe to assume that high impact practices are embedded into all of the different coursework that our institutions are offering? And I guess maybe some of this is indicative of the shift to looking at programs holistically as opposed to programs just being made up of a bunch of courses. When programs were made up of a bunch of courses, then these different alternative learning formats made a bit more sense. But so it sounds like the alternative learning formats, we don't need any of them, except for the competency-based assessments.
KCTCS is doing competency-based education, very small pockets with very, you know, small numbers, but we are not doing assessment. So I probably will need to talk to my CBE person to find out what language would be appropriate for us.
Okay.
We're not doing direct assessment.
Okay. Okay. And maybe that'll just be 2 categories. Maybe that's how that ends up shaking out. So we've talked about online programs. That's a no, don't track those separately. Off-campus instructional sites, those seem to be like, perhaps whack-a-mole, so not worry about tracking those. Branch campuses, I assume that's in the same category. I know it, would that be correct to say, or is there something about branch campuses that we'd want to keep? Okay, well, that covers that. So it sounds like all of the definition, most of the definitions the CPE has for alternative learning formats are really unnecessary. We can just kind of strike the whole thing. And we probably want to focus in on competency-based education and then competency-based direct education with direct assessments. Maybe those are the two categories that we're left with. Is-
And Sheila, you know, I just want to say, I just circle back to what Jennifer said earlier on. I think she had a really good point about saying delivery modes instead of focusing on distance learning definitions, because really 100% face-to-face is not a distance learning definition. I mean, those are delivery modes. And so that might be then you can put them all together in one group, competency-based and face-to-face and distance, that can all go in one group, and then you don't have to have two separate ones.
Okay. Okay, those are the things that I wanted us to discuss today. Is there anything else before we move on to what Rayanne had asked about? Is there anything else about this general topic that you'd like to say at this present time?
Hey, Sheila, I just want to say thank you for asking us. I
Oh.
really appreciate that a lot.
Oh,
Thanks.
well, you're very welcome. And I hope I've made it clear when talking with all of you that if please be honest. I appreciate honesty. You can be kind and honest, so I always appreciate you being honest. So if CP is asking for something that's too much, let us know and we'll see what we can do. All right, Rayanne, you had asked a question about the graduate profile. Is there something specific that you had a question about?
No, I think that a few meetings ago you indicated, which I think has been scrapped since, but tracking outcomes for programs around each one of the graduate profile, that came as a shock to me. So I'm just trying to see if there's any other movements in that area. So just a general update.
Okay. The CPE is moving forward with competency-based assessments for the 10 essential skills. So that's a general FYI. We'll have a group coming in September to look at some work that's been done over the summer. The Competency-Based Education Network, or CBEN, worked with the levels of mastery that were identified in the spring, and they've been working on assessments so that instructors can ensure that the skill has been taught to the student and the student's able to exhibit, for example, critical thinking behaviors, that sort of thing. In terms of curriculum mapping, there's not been any further movement on that. I think at some point, I know at some point, the 10 essential skills are going to have to be mapped in the curriculum. That's the direction CP is going. It's part of the strategic agenda. I don't think that's on anybody's to-do list for this week, maybe not even this year. But there is a plan that the 10 essential skills are going to need to be mapped. I think I'm assuming that it's going to start with the gen ed programs, because those tend to have less, I mean, programs or courses get added to them, but there tends to be less change to a gen ed program than your typical, baccalaureate program. So my guess is in the short run that the 10 essential skills will have to be, by short run, I mean the next 5 to 7 years. Institutions will be expected to be able to map those skills into the gen ed curriculum. I know that the course spreadsheet that you all have for programs, I don't know if it's called Keeps, but I know you know that spreadsheet I'm talking about with courses that has all that information. There's another one that's been designed that has that's reflective of the 10 essential skills. I'm not thank you. Yes, Sydney, the KPPS course template. Even inside the agency, people refer to these different modules as different things. So it took me a long time to figure out, well, Keeps was KPEDS kind of. So anyway, so at some point we're going to go that direction, but there's no going in that direction right now. Rayanne, does that answer your question? I know it's there's not a lot of detail to it, but.
Well, yeah, there's not a lot of detail, and 5 to 7 years is a huge length of time. CPE I mean, UK is currently looking at its general education. So, I mean, if these things move, institutions, we don't just shift. We're very slow at shifting. So it is what it is at this time, but just kind of, if this is on the roadmap, it's helpful to know what is going to be required. What is the implications for not following through on this? How are we going to be expected to do reports on this? If it's just general education. So just kind of helpful to know what the roadmap is for this going forward.
And I would say, oh, sorry, let me respond to Ray, and then Terry, you can say stuff. I think probably 5 to 7 was probably a little broad. Probably closer within 2 to 3 years, it's going to be part of a requirement, but I don't think it's reasonable to expect institutions to do things they haven't done before. So I don't think this is going to be something that's a requirement that is effective September 1, everybody must do this. I think it's going to be something along lines of, as of September 1, 3 years from now, this will be a requirement, however you can start doing it now. But I do think the mapping of the 10 essential skills, we're going all in on that in terms of employability, workforce skills, and what we want all students to know at the end of 2 years and 4 years. So you can assume that curriculum mapping for those 10 essential skills is coming. My suspicion is it will start with gen ed, but it's coming. They're still working on the competencies. And the next phase, I think, is going to be called assurance of learning, where we get some more detail about ensuring that the student has learned what has been what has been presented to them. But I don't see this as being an initiative that'll go away. I think it's going to continue.
All right, thank you, appreciate it.
Yes, Tiara.
And it could be because I was trying to catch up on some things, and I do apologize for missing all the meetings prior. So no one else in the state is required, beside KSU, to map the 10 essential skills throughout all of our curriculum programs at the current time.
I believe so, yes, and I don't know why. I can find that answer out to you, but
I know why it was legislated.
Oh,
So I
okay.
got that point, but I assumed everybody was having so much fun like what we're having, but I am mistaken. So thank you for providing that. That's fun.
That's a party of one, but your party will grow over time. It may take a little while for you to have number 2 show up, but it will grow. Yeah, Lori.
Hey, so I just wanted to get some, and you may not have answers to this. So we're talking about moving forward. This is coming. We're going to start mapping these 10 essential skills onto all of our undergraduate programs.
Yes.
Graduate programs?
No.
No? Okay. So I know we're talking about curriculum mapping, but then is the idea that then eventually there will be assessments, program level assessments for each program. So gen ed, I know we already do, we already have a certain like kind of a assessment with CPE for that. But I mean, is the idea that eventually there will be, where you said something about making sure students, demonstrating the students are learning these competencies. So I can see kind of like a tiered approach where you say, these are the CPE learning outcomes, and here's how they map onto our program learning outcomes, and here's how those map onto our curriculum. And we're directly assessing our program learning outcomes, but are we then also going to be doing assessments that are directly linked to these 10 competencies for every single undergraduate program? And then also, is it associate and bachelor's or just bachelor's? And then I assume that certificates don't count because they're too specialized. So sorry, that was a lot of questions, but that's kind of like where are we going with this? So
I would say associate's degrees, yes, as well as 4-year degrees.
Okay.
And I had a really good answer, and you threw me at the end with those extra 2 questions. What you just wanted to know?
So the original question was more about, is the plan to, after we have set up these curriculum maps, start doing assessments where the program sorry, we are directly assessing each program in terms of what students are learning for these 10 outcomes, or will there be more of that kind of tiered approach where it's like, here's the assessment of our program outcomes, and here's how those outcomes map on to the 10 essential skills?
I don't have an answer for you. I think the only answer that I can give that would be the right answer is we would have this kind of discussion again over a few months to try to figure out what's manageable. So I think, I mean, the program review process is, I know the CPE asks you to do more work than you do internally, but it's intended to kind of build on top of it. So I would imagine us wanting to do something that builds on top of what institutions are already doing, as opposed to doing something completely different that requires you to do different things. I will say that I have told folks internally that the biggest issue we have is not that we can't get curriculum maps from the folks in the provost's office, you all in this kind of area. The problem is going to be you all getting those curriculum maps from the individual faculty in the departments and the colleges that you all serve. So I do think there's the CPE can require whatever it wants. I say this as an employee of the agency, but we can't hold you accountable for giving it to us when you aren't the ones that are creating the document to begin with. It should be the faculty in the program that are creating the curriculum map. So I do think there's going to have to be, I mean, I think, you know, I'm working with you all, Jana Weiss is working with the Graduate Profile Academy teams, but I do think that what we're missing is there's some little nugget in the middle that helps make sure that the work of those graduate profile teams is working where we want it to, and it's going to also flow up through you all. Because the biggest issue I see currently is that, for example, the CPE could say effective September 1, curriculum maps required for 10 essential skills. And then you all are just stymied because you can't supply what it is that people aren't providing to you. So I do think that's one thing that we're going to have to, I do see that as a bit of a, maybe hole isn't quite the right word, but until these curriculum maps are more commonly used and the 10 essential skills are they've been around longer, I think it's going to be hard to get these curriculum maps from the faculty. I think some of them may not be able to do a curriculum map, maybe for their own program, let alone for the 10 essential skills. I think it just may depend on the faculty member in the department. So I just did want to make that point, that I think it's not just asking you all for these things, it's making sure that there's a foundation for you all to be able to get the things that we're asking for. Yeah, Rayanne?
Thank you, Sheila. And so is the goal then to require us to use the rubrics that were developed last year? And then will there be guidance on what types of like artifacts we would be able to use this rubric on, or just we have to use the rubric, implement that however the institution sees?
I think it could be a little of both. So, so one of the things, for any of you who've tried to name our 10 essential skills easily, we're currently working on shorter names for them because the 10 essential skills are a little hard to name or to refer to given the long phrases that they are. You know, I don't know where it'll go. I think the intent is ask the question again, please.
It was just, and I think these questions came out of the conversation when we were developing the rubrics. What do we have to do with these rubrics? Are you going to require the institutions and the programs to use them? And then it seemed like the next step was to start developing some competencies, measures, like, are you all going to provide like assessment guidelines of how we would provide you this data? Some of those. And I like I said, when we were developing the rubrics, that was the huge question. What is the expectations from CPE on these?
I think the specific expectations are somewhat up in the air as we're still working through it. Now, I do know one of the CPE employees has gone through and evaluated the 10 essential skills and compared them to all of the other well-known assessment tools like the value rubrics and I think QA Commons, I think NACE has some. And so she's done an evaluation of how the 10 essential skills, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word mapping, but about the similar, and there's a lot more, there are a lot more similarities than there are differences, but the similarities between, you know, perhaps two of those methodologies. Part of the work teams that are coming back to CPE in September are going to be looking at the assessments that CBIN, put together. So for example, one of them is, let's see, so one of the assessments for quantitative analysis could be, for example, this is one that we talked about. So at the, you know, when it comes time to do the student assessment, when the final project or whatever, could take the form of something like, so in terms of quantitative reasoning, it's say your mother has said she'll give you $1,000 on a down payment for a house. So you need to decide if you want to rent or if you want to buy. And then it gives you a bunch of facts and figures like rental costs and what lawn care costs are, and if you have to buy a lawnmower, and factoring in rent and interest rates, and then you decide whether you should be doing whether you should rent or buy. And so the assessment requires the student to go through all of those different steps. So some of those assessments, the state will provide those assessments, and I think they'll serve two purposes. One, it will be the assessment itself, but also they're easily modifiable, customizable to a particular disciplinary area or subject matter. And I think when folks have access to those assessments, they'll be able to see how to build or create their own assessments that do the same sort of thing. So there will be some assessments that are provided, but I think institutions and faculty will have the freedom to do this. We want them to use effective assessments. It's not necessary that they use the exact one that CPE provided. Is that what you're asking?
Yes, thank you.
Are there any other questions, anyone? All right. Well, I will turn this in. Well, I will ask somebody else to help me turn this into a YouTube video. I'll send it out to the group. If you, as always, if you've got thoughts that come up after the fact about any of the stuff we've talked about today, let me know. I'll see you all about the same time next month. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
Sheila.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.